Welcome to the Earth Your Wow podcast, brought to you by Reuserbox, providing a better way to buy cardboard boxes. We're your hosts, Jack and Ellie.
This is the podcast where we talk to industry experts and change makers to try to answer the question, how do we make our businesses better for people and the planet? So today we're chatting to Holly Arnold, Director of Impact at Raw Tipis. Raw Tipis has evolved to deliver beautiful and indulgent events without the negative environmental impact. As a certified B Corp, they are committed to helping pioneer a regenerative outdoor events industry. Welcome to Earth Your Wow, Holly, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Lovely intro, and thank you for having me.
I was really keen to kind of hear, what is it you guys do? Why do you do it? And, who do you work with?
Yeah, so I actually work with my partner Cam, and it was probably about nearly 5 years ago now, where we started to think about events and, funnily enough, TPs. So we have an event company called Raw Tipis. There are many arms to the business, but predominantly it's events, TP hire and furniture. And I think we're pretty unique in the way that we think and operate within the event space. We were very much inspired back then to kind of try and break the mold a little bit of the event industry, which for us just always seemed very wasteful, overindulgent, many of those things that are still prominent in the industry now. And we're both from a creative background, and we kind of saw it as an opportunity to use our skills for good, and to recreate this model in a more creative, sustainable, but luxury way. We still want to be able to offer, a really incredible experience for our guests, and that really is the prominent feature, I think, because if we're creating events which are less impactful, then that's amazing, but not really important for everybody. And so if we're also delivering events which are low impact and still have that incredible kind of comfort, luxury experience, then for us, that those two things, when they marry together, are really important. And yeah, we can talk a little bit more about how we do that.
Yeah, and so obviously we're like I've been to like festivals, and I've seen how just how much crap there is at the end of the festival, especially tents, right?
Yeah.
Is that how are your, like, how is what you do different? How what's kind of the how's your solution different to
Well, what do you think are like the problems with like this traditional events industry where people just like take their tent with them and just leave their rubbish there, leave the tent there, go home at the end of the weekend? I think we've all seen it.
We've all seen it.
We've seen it on the news anyway.
Yeah, this weird thing where like most people just are sensible when it comes to like their waste and stuff, but then when they go to a festival or an event, they just seem to forget about that.
I think it's got into this this mindset of, oh, the organisers just clear it up, don't worry, just leave it. Yeah, they clear it up for you.
It's very short term, isn't it? I think that's like a lot of it. It's and exactly how business operates, and kind of what B Corps are trying to break the mold of is this short termism of it's happening now. And I think the thing is about events is there's so much in it that's about celebration and a non kind of like an exclusive experience, something different that people experience every day, from what you buy for your outfits, which we actually talk about by rotation on our website, because obviously, especially for weddings and events, people buy things that they never wear again. So we talk a little bit about that on our website. But yeah, I think it's when you're there and you've got all these different suppliers. And I think if there's no, unlike Glastonbury, I think is, for me, is a standout where environmental and social impact is very much, you know, their core. It's their values, it's at their heart, it's all throughout their history of how they've evolved. But I think without that kind of storytelling and purpose as an event, which many aren't, you've got suppliers coming on every angle, from energy, where obviously still, you know, really noisy, smelly diesel generators are still used. So we, at all of our events, if we need to use energy, we'll always use electric generators, which of course are more expensive, but they are silent, they are non-toxic, you know, all of those things that are really, again, give off a more luxury feel, because you're not, you know, polluting the air as you're putting the lights on. So I think it's really down to suppliers, and unfortunately, I work in the creative sector, and so I work on a lot of productions and TV and advertising and film, and that's kind of my other hat that I wear. And it's exactly the same thing. It's the short-term thinking of, we need to put on the best event for the cheapest budget. We've got all of these suppliers who, you know, get the brief, put their quote together, and turn up on the day with very little communication actually in the lead up. And what we're trying to do actually with our new venue is to have and really open the conversation for engagement well before the event. You know, we're trying to talk to them now 6 months before. We've created a really long tight form to gather data, to tell them we're going to be gathering data to measure the impact of the event through ILA, which is the event carbon calculator. So I think the communication is really key, and for us as a B Corp, but also for, you know, a purpose-driven event company that's had environmental sustainability in particular at the forefront from the very, very beginning, it's always been really important to think about, you know, what are our impacts on people and the planet across every single element of events. And it's something that for us is absolutely paramount in every decision we make. I guess that's where my role started. I was kind of this like voice in the background, always trying to kind of question where we're sourcing things from. And in terms of waste, I think the problem is people are buying things in excess, and they're buying new things all the time. So you buy something new off the internet in, you know, rolls or scrolls or whatever it is, and it's all packaged up in more plastic. And we actually very rarely buy anything new. So everything we buy, in terms of furniture, decorations, lighting, all of these things, we always try and buy sourced, reused, upcycled, or we actually go and visit. We have amazing antique fairs that we go and visit and buy really cool collectible stuff, just to make our event spaces a bit unique. But yeah, back to your kind of thought on festivals. I think it all kind of stems from the communication and then leading that into suppliers. So in terms of food and drink, like, we know that food and drink has such a big impact on events, and just by having a menu that's 50% veggie and vegan across most caterers really does up the chances of people ordering those dishes. We saw that a lot at a previous event we ran in the Christmas time in 2023. And once you start to measure the impact, which a lot of these festivals are doing now, which is great, they are having to report, then you can kind of see where the material impacts are from. But yeah, so I think it's fossil free. Trying to be fossil free. We know that we can't do that across transport in particular, because we're still waiting for, especially in the event sector, we're waiting for the right vehicles which can actually pull and have a lot of weight on them, which are electric vehicles. Something that we're doing, and we've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years, is decreasing our travel radius every year by about 10%. And that means that while we are transitioning to EVs in our non-pulling vehicles, we can actually still reduce our travel radius and travel emissions year on year by reducing our radius. And that comes with being able to kind of grow the business and grow relationships more locally as well. So local, I guess, is another thing to touch upon, because it's really interesting when people start to kind of look around for suppliers, and they generally, if it's just profit driven and that's all you're thinking about, you're just going to be thinking about money, and that comes with, you know, an expense to people on the planet usually. And so we would always try and source everything locally. Within the B Corp space, that's within about 50 miles. And that is also really beneficial to the other businesses in the area. So if we're partnering with other businesses, we will always try and make sure that they align with our values. And we've got lots and lots and lots of documents to do that, in terms of like our code of ethics and different practices. But that's where generally I get looped into all these different emails to kind of share more about the B Corp movement and how we can use business, and actually that we're not just asking them to travel and car share, which is, I think, is the bare minimum. We're actually asking them to look into and disclose to us if, for example, their employees are on a living wage, which is a common thing within different sectors, that especially hospitality, that people aren't paid the living wage, which is of course quite a lot higher than the minimum wage.
And it's a question actually on that. So is your if I was putting on a festival or an event, I don't know, some sort of event, Jackfest, and I was looking for somebody to help me arrange that, and you know, I looked at you and I looked at another company that maybe weren't impact driven in the way that they design the event and supply the TPs, for example. Would you guys likely be like noticeably more expensive, do you think, or?
No, I mean, it's funny. Sometimes it's really hard. Some people play the play the field a bit, and they're like, "We've got this cheaper quote," and we always say to them, "Okay, like we'd love to see it." The problem is, like with many things which are more sustainable as such, they are actually higher quality and they last a longer period of time. And I know I listened to a couple of your podcasts recently, and I remember the same conversation of like, we can, even if we have a quote that comes in which is slightly less than ours, we just say to them, look, this is our price because we're giving you really high quality kit. We talk about this on a lot of our different documents and online, but we want our kit to last, because that obviously not only is financially beneficial, but environmentally. So we really care for our kit. And sometimes we go to these festivals and there'll be 3 different TP companies, you know, putting their stuff up. And for us, because we know a lot about DPs, we are actually shocked by the standard that they're putting out there. I also think it's to do with the service that you're giving. We're not, through our, like, if we're a supplier of TP and furniture, for example, you know, we're not the event planner, but our team are really kind of generous with their time. They will always offer their expertise. And for example, I will jump on a call, or I'll jump into an email and explain how maybe they could be, you know, less impactful, or different ideas. And I think that's also part of, you know, a service is, you know, how you give your service and how you share ideas and how you help the client in other ways is also part of it. So yeah, we're not generally more expensive, and if we are, sometimes we just explain why.
Well, that's kind of the thing I notice is a lot of the time, if companies, I think a lot of the time companies or businesses or startups, they're concerned that if they have a lower impact option and it is a bit more expensive, that customers won't buy their product, or they won't, you know, pay for their service. But I just wondered if that was an issue that you get, because I think a lot of the time it's a bit of a complex people have, but I think a lot of the time
you do of course get people thinking that there's like a green premium, and companies will kind of slap on a bit more to say this is, and that, I think that's where the problem comes in. People assume it's going to be more expensive because it's green, and they think, oh no, we're not going to go for that, it'll be too pricey, let's go for a one that's
and actually
sustainable.
Sometimes it's the opposite. So like for us, you know, rather than buying things new online and and shopping around and buying furniture, like we actually think about how we can make it sustainably. The problem we have, and make it in-house. So we design everything on a 3D software, and then we make it. And we have like really highly skilled carpenters in our team, and then so not so skilled, and then they all kind of contribute. And what's kind of important about that is we're then able to understand the supply chain from that perspective. Like we know where we're sourcing the wood from. We have an amazing partner, which is, he manages the forests of the royal estate, and he is an incredibly knowledgeable person. And we work with him because he doesn't work with really large businesses and really large projects, because that of course is not sustainable to be just cutting down loads of trees. But he's really knowledgeable about forest management. The problem I would say about buying reclaimed things, which obviously we buy a lot of wood, everything we buy generally is all natural materials, and that's quite a lot to do with our name of being raw, stripping everything back, nothing, no glitters or plastics or glossy things like that. It's very much like raw materials. So we use a lot of hemp, we use a lot of bamboo, a lot of wicker, and a lot of wood, and of course our canvas, which is the teepees. And that sometimes can be really frustrating. You're buying something wood that's reclaimed, like beautiful old floorboards, or that kind of thing, and generally it can be really frustrating. That for us, that's where it is way more expensive, sometimes 3 times more expensive to buy reclaimed wood than new wood, which is just it's really, really upsetting, isn't it? Because you're thinking you're just chopping down, more trees when we've got so much wood out there. So that's where I really think it's the triple bottom line for B Corps of balancing people, planet, and profit is just so important, because sometimes you just have to make those decisions. And we're currently building our venue at Tipis in Maple Durham, which is in Oxfordshire. And we're building everything from scratch. So windows, walls around the teepees, which gives them a lot more space, wooden flooring, different furniture, bars. We're actually just building a shepherd hut loo. So we've bought antique bits for the loos. And when you look at all that resource and all that wood, like buying every single part of that reclaimed, and also for the uniform parts, buying wood that's exactly the same can't always happen. So we have to constantly balance people, planet, and profit, and think about how we're making these decisions.
I feel like, yeah, it's quite inspiring. I loved what you said about when you actually limit the radius of where you will travel, because I think that's a really great idea, and I don't think I've heard of that before. So you're not going to go further than a certain radius, and you're actually, is that just until you can transition to electric vehicles? Is that right?
I think so. So we've got vans, and we've got towing trucks, and we've transitioned one out of our 2 kind of like run around vehicles to EVs. The second one is happening this year. And so what's left is just waiting for electric vehicles that can actually pull those trailers with a lot of weight, as I mentioned. And it was actually my partner's idea. He just said, well, what about if we just reduce this? Like, we don't want to. Also, when you're doing events, like, you have a massive team. These teepees are ginormous. They take a really long time to put up, and our team is really skilled. And we say, in a lot of our reviews, people say, the team is like really skilled and they really work together. And it's a lot about teamwork to get these builds done, and sometimes really limited time. So you're getting a lot of people there, which means we car share. Everyone goes from our warehouse in Windsor. But yeah, for us, it was a really straightforward decision. We don't want to be driving all these people 100 miles. A lot of these companies actually don't have any limit on them at all. And when you look at actually the industry that is outdoor events and teepees and marquees and things, you can very much see that these companies are dotted around. And they're, we're in the Oxfordshire, Berkshire, Surrey kind of region. There's a lot of events happening. It's a pretty good area. We don't actually need to go any further. So I think we started at around 60 miles, something like that. and now I think we're like within 40.
Wow.
We've really reduced, and it doesn't affect our business any, if anything. The team are more energized. You're not sitting in the car all the time. And for us, it really makes sense up until that point where we've got electric vehicles and we can manage that, better and reduce our emissions in that front.
I think it's a really smart way of reducing your footprint when you essentially have to drive things around the country. And I hadn't thought of that before. I think you've touched on this quite a bit, but can you just explain the other things that are unique about you that help you reduce your footprint? And, particularly like the products you use that are different from those traditional ones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. So when you obviously do, I mean, I'm a net zero consultant and strategy consultant. So when I write these production plans, you have a whole kind of area of production plan where you talk about what you've reduced and where your emissions have been reduced. What is interesting for us is when we first started the business, before we even launched the business, we basically created like a long list of things that we were going to do differently. And this has all really been on our website. We've got sustainability pages on both Raw Tipis and Tipis at Mapledon website, which I constantly update with all new data to try and kind of, if anything, help other businesses within the sector take action. There's some really simple things like cable ties. As much as I get bored of talking about plastic, unfortunately, the cable ties are still prevalent across the industry. And I'm talking not just little ones like this as well, like massive, ones that hold these structures together. And from the very start, it didn't take long for us to realize there are Velcro, cable ties, which go back on themselves. So they're really, really strong. They last forever. You just keep using them until, maybe they last like 3-4 years. And for me, that's just such a simple thing that everybody could adopt, but no, cable ties are still being used everywhere. So that was really interesting. Also for us, we obviously, apart from our vehicles, we do try and do everything fossil free. So all of our tools are electric. Now it might sound really simple, but when it comes to actually things that guests and customers see, like events people, they can then see that, like, for example, our fire pits that we create are all bioethanol. Now it's the most sustainable solution, but it's not a long-term sustainable solution, as we know, for homes, because biofuel, you are burning crops and organic material. But it's definitely the best thing out there. And again, it has these lovely benefits like there is no smoke, there is no smell. If you're sitting around a fire pit in beautiful gowns at a wedding or, in a festival, you don't get all that smoke in your face, and it gives that an incredible amount of heat. So with the tools and with fire pits and transitioning our vehicles, being fossil free is something which is so important to us. Yeah, we know fossil fuels contribute to over 75-80% of global emissions. So for us, that's something that is so often left out of the conversation, yet it's obviously the biggest impact. We're very passionate about that, as am I myself. There's really small things as well in events, like, if we're putting on events and we're getting cleaners, speaking to them and saying, okay, we don't want you to be using toxic cleaning materials, like really simple things that, just takes that conversation. And for us, having B Corp, especially, which is only just last year we certified, but having that as a kind of label really helps to say, this is why we're doing it, because sometimes people don't understand why we're asking these questions as much as you try and explain. And it can seem a bit kind of strange or obtrusive to people to ask, like, what cleaning products do you use? There could be an assumption they think we're talking about quality, whereas we are also talking about, the environmental impact and and impact on people. I think that's a lot of it. In terms of fossil free as well, I'd probably say that we are growing our team, and anyone that is working with us, working from home, we ensure they switch on to renewable energy at home, because those things are, like, obviously super simple, something that every business should be doing. But again, are often not spoken about within the sector. I spoke about suppliers, didn't I? But I think that is something which there are so many different suppliers that make up an event. And I think, it's really important to really focus on every single one and the impact that that sector has. And so for even for our bar company, we're writing contracts, they're completely aligned with us. We're going to be looking at drink lists. So we're across our bars, whenever we do pop-ups, we eliminate plastic. It's always about, you can always replace it with glass and you can always replace it with metal. And so that's just a standard. And then when it comes to the supplies we're using, again, we're looking at where we can replace generic kind of spirits, etc., with local or B Corp brands, or general, just more responsible, maybe family-owned businesses, to help, with the kind of local economy as well.
I think there's like a really interesting learning there, I think, for anyone listening, because I think it sounds like you guys have really mastered this like concept of like buying better. Like you're buying better quality products, but then you're getting those long-term benefits from them. Even like your idea of like restricting the distance of events that you'll put on. Like I think it sounds like you guys have got like a more. It sounds like more of a a lifestyle business almost. That it's almost kind of feels a bit like maybe you wouldn't want to do longer term events because it wouldn't be as fun almost. But I think that like the learning for people that are listening is it's like sometimes. Yeah, I think it's mastering how to buy better. I think it's looking at the bigger picture, the longer term picture.
I think that also helps that, Cam and I are the ones that have been kind of championing it from the beginning, and that's how we live our lives. We are conscious people. We think about what we buy less, we buy quality, we buy refills, and all these things are hugely, beneficial to our lives. And also to our wallet. Like a lot of the time, people think things are always going to be a lot more expensive, but a lot of the time they aren't. What's been really interesting actually is we started the company 4 or 5 years ago, and now we have, I would say, about 50% of our team are also in environmental roles elsewhere. So a lot of our team, obviously we're seasonal, the business, so not everyone works for us full time. We have a lot of part time. We have a lot of like seasonal workers that work with us, and through having this kind of message which makes us stand out, which is always about balancing luxury, sustainability, and creativity, we have a really attractive people that align with that, and that helps us to actually embed those things within the events, right, as well on site, and that's been like really incredible, because if it was just us two, championing it from the sidelines, you wouldn't get the same effect. So yeah, that's been really nice to see.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting is you were very excitedly telling us about the cable tie solution of Velcro, but like I feel like you've kind of like gamified this idea of making a low impact company. Like you guys live and breathe it, and as a result, it's really fun, and it's amazing to see. I imagine it's making a really nice place to work as well.
Yeah,
for everyone in your
I
company.
bet that you have a good culture because you're all quite similar people.
Well,
and it's outdoors, right? It's outdoors.
Yeah.
It's people that want to spend time outdoors, and like Cam and I both grew up in the countryside, and I think that really, well, we know scientifically that really has an impact on who you are in your like later life. And again, like people that want to work outdoors every single day, that is what it is. And for the team that are on the ground, managing these events and putting up the events, they're spending, they want to get inside when they get home, because they've been spending like 9 hours in nature and battling the elements or in the sun. And that's just a whole another part to the people that we attract. And I think generally with people who are in the outdoors more, want to protect it and love it and respect it and want to protect it. And so also like code of ethics is obviously about respecting and respecting nature wherever we go, whether that's the ground or the water or we never ever would want to be like polluting a space or leaving rubbish, and sometimes we're tidying up after other suppliers, to be honest. So yeah, it's just a good kind of groundwork to have the right people.
Yeah, I have a question. So I feel like there aren't many companies out there like you guys. There aren't many companies that were solely created because you have a vision of a low impact company that has a positive impact on people and planet. You know that there aren't many businesses like that. But what there is out there is loads and loads of companies that will have to soon become more sustainable. You know, like even if they don't want to, it's like you will have to. Um, and I think they're in quite a different mind frame because for you, it's like this is exciting trying to work out new ways to take it to the next level. But for a lot of businesses out there, and maybe some people listening, you know, they're working in a company which this is like an additional thing they're trying to think about, which is separate. So it's not embedded in like the culture of their company. I guess my question is how, because you said something interesting about just being outdoors, like people that like being outdoors, like they find it, they're more like-minded with you or easier to connect on that. I just wondered if you've got any ideas or advice about, you know, if somebody's listening and they're not a sustainable company, but they're a company that's trying to become more sustainable. They're trying to almost take some of your kind of culture and put it into a company that hasn't been built like that. How do you think they could do that?
Mm, good question.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting actually, just on your first point, because we either act now with excitement and intention and like possibility, or we act later on when we have to, when we're told to, when there's legislation, when it's probably a bit boring and it's a task that we don't have a choice over. And so, like, I think that point is really paramount because we have a choice right now. We shouldn't, but we do in the UK. And for me, it's like, how do we like reimagine the sector we're in? And I think every sector has such a different role to play. As I said, I work in the creative sector. So I work with TV companies, advertising, film, design, craft, and events. And even though that is one large sector of influence, which is what really excites me, every sector that I speak to, and when I also a carbon consultant for a government program called Better Futures. So if anyone needs free consulting, please do look it up. But I've met so many businesses that kind of don't see the opportunity. And I think that's where, you know, that's the role of business right now and of business owners in particular, to look at the opportunity of their sector, to reconnect, find communities within your sector, see what they're doing, see who's leading the way. I would also suggest to look to B Corps in the sector, like what are they doing? How are they trying to push the industry in the right direction and not kind of hang on to the old kind of norms that are in the industry? And for us in the event industry, we have touch points with people, you know, pretty much every day in events. And that's for me where when we did my last event called TPs on the Green, it was so important to realize that we can actually like, people just think they're coming for a drink. Like people think they're just coming for like a nice like Christmas drink with their friends. But what's the opportunity that we've got to really make a difference? And we did loads of different things. Like, you know, we set up like frames with little bits of information which are quite quirky, talking about what we've done differently. So like glitter-free baubles and paper mache this and just grabbing people's attention. And I think if we see every opportunity, if we see the industry and the business as an opportunity, that's where it gets exciting. And for us, it's very much like we're creatives, like we want to innovate, we want to find solutions. And in terms of sustainability, I mean, you can't really make really impactful changes unless you know where you're starting from. So my point to businesses that I work with is let's just start by measuring. Measure your carbon footprint. Now it sounds, you know, not that exciting, and we're talking about emissions again, so not very exciting for people. But generally, that's going to help you start to even just think about decarbonising and setting net zero targets and setting a reduction plan and those kind of very simple things that many companies aren't doing. There's about over 9,000 SMEs that have committed to taking action in that way at the moment. But in general, I think if we can all look to nature, that would be an incredible source of inspiration. You know, not many people and not many businesses get out into nature and spend time in nature. But generally, when you start to reconnect with nature and understand all the incredible things it's doing for you every single day, that's where we can actually learn to love it and protect it. And that could be, I'm doing a project, that could be on your rooftop in your company building. It could be on the little bit of green you've got outside. It could be on your windowsill. It could be in your local parks, or it could be in a local community space that you can see that is degrading and you want to protect it. And I think that's where nature and our reconnection and understanding of us being in nature as an ecosystem and one ecosystem is, for me, where I see the most opportunity, because people begin to be more excited about it naturally than carbon emissions.
I think as well, something we've talked about previously with a couple of guests actually, is kind of like connecting like your product or service to nature. You know, obviously it's easy for you guys because doing events, you're out in nature, I guess, a lot of the time. But, you know, like we talked to a company and they sell beer, right? And they were talking about, you know, they were trying and they were saying like people are so disconnected with like food and drink, for example, with where it comes from, and they were really trying to like use their product to raise awareness about that. But I think maybe any business could, I've just like ideas here, but you know, like any business, if they're struggling to work out how to create a culture around reducing impact, maybe it's like start with your product or service. You know, even if you have a product or service that doesn't look like it's, you know, from the natural world. I mean, it will be at some point, right?
I mean, you don't. People don't want to. They're not going to be interested in protecting something unless they value it at some level. So, I guess it's getting people more connected, isn't it?
Yeah.
I actually get. I ask some of my clients sometimes if they know what a life cycle assessment is, and a lot of them are like, no. And I actually find this a really useful tool because, as you said, especially with food and drink, you know, things that we consume every single day, people can't see, unless it's like a piece of wood. I'm just looking over there, I've got an easel, which is wood. You know, you're very quickly seeing that was a tree. Most people don't consider at all where these things have come from. So sometimes I say to them, oh, do you know what the life cycle assessment is? No, okay. So I get up one of the diagrams, generic off Google, it doesn't really matter. They all kind of say the same thing. And I say, okay, so what about, you know, in your procurement policy that we're writing, how are we going to help people imagine, someone that's not in this conversation right now, how are we going to help them imagine that, you know, everything they buy has been extracted from somewhere, it's been manufactured somewhere, it's been transported to you, and then where's it going to go? Like, is it a single-use product, or where is it going to go next? And I think that's a really, really, especially as I've got, you know, a creative mind and I kind of see things in certain ways, and we can all kind of understand this idea of circularity, right? And once we actually think about it, and a circular economy. And I think that for me is like a really interesting tool to just say, okay, every single thing that we touch and feel and buy and see, you know, like, where has it come from? How are we using it, and where is it going to end up? And that can generally help, I've seen, across all parts of, you know, making your business more sustainable or more consciously minded, and helping your teams to actually do the same.
I think as well, it's like building a story around the product or the company, and I feel like it's just easier to get people engaged if you have that story in the first place. I was actually looking at like for like more sustainable workwear suppliers this week, and I spoke to a company and I was like, how is this sweatshirt that you supply, because they were saying it's like eco-friendly. I was like, how is it more eco-friendly? Because they just said it's eco-friendly, and they were telling me that they get, it was like a Dutch company. They were telling me that they make it, it's part made out of like recycled plastic bottles that they get. And I was like, this is amazing. Why don't you tell people like this is how many recycled bottles make this sweatshirt? And they were like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I never thought about it. They're just calling it eco-friendly, but they, like I had to like email them and phone them and find out. But I think
communication is.
I just think then people find it more interesting and more engaging. And at the end of the day, it's like if we're going to try and address these problems as a society, like we need to do it together, right?
And I think that's also been a big criticism of greenwashing, right? Because a lot of companies are, greenwashing is getting tightened, which is great. It's got many different forms: greenwashing, greenhushing, etc. But businesses in general are sometimes afraid to talk about things because they're worried about how it'll be perceived, or if they'll be criticized, or if it's just not quite right. And generally that comes from businesses not having the skills and knowledge to actually talk about things authentically or really transparently. Again, there's something in the B Corp movement that we have a lot of tools to, they help you with these communications. You get communications packages. They help you talk about your story and your purpose and your mission in different ways. But I mean, and that's what really excites me about working in the creative sector is we are facing a real, crisis of imagination and communication, because we're trying to communicate things in very, like, when we've got very little time to communicate things and shape culture and shape society. But really, that's why I think like reframing things around nature can, will touch some people. Reframing things around diversity and inclusion and all these other, we'll talk to other people. But what we're trying to, and what we really should be saying, is that all of this is interconnected, and the system that we're living in doesn't prioritize people and the planet, and that actually all businesses can. We don't need to, we don't need to wait for government. We don't need to wait for this legislation change. Businesses can take action now. And actually, you can look up any kind of data online. We know that businesses who are taking action on sustainability, social and environmental causes are gaining and retaining the best talent. They're gaining shareholders. They are being trusted with things. They are actually partnering with new clients and finding these collaborations they didn't have. So the benefits to business is actually huge. But understandably, people feel overwhelmed. But, this is where there's a lot of resources out there. I always point like SMEs to the SME Climate Hub. It's an amazing free tool. Everyone should take a look if they're starting their journey.
And just wanted to ask on that, you're saying like companies can find it easier to like attract and retain talent. Obviously a really important thing in a business. Why do you think that is?
Well,
I'm just keen to know.
So we know that there's lots of stats out there about especially Gen Z and what people believe in. So people are we're in a crazy time. People are getting bombarded with news, and most of the population in the UK believes that climate change is real. They believe that these things are a threat. Not everyone's taking action. I think it's 40 to 60%, something like that at the moment. But they believe that other people should be. And a lot of the reason why people aren't taking action is because they feel that the government should be. And so that's that's kind of pulling them away. But actually, we're seeing that people want to be in businesses that stand for something else, not just for profit, shareholder gain, etc. People want to be in businesses that maybe align with their own values, or that are just being better and just going above and beyond the business as usual. And because there are businesses out there, people are going, well, I can find one. I can leave. I can find a company that cares about something else other than money. And of course, like that leads into culture as well. If you're living a completely profit driven business, you are not focusing on the wellness and the well-being of your team. You're not thinking about, how you can find equitable solutions for people, and you're not thinking about, how can we be more inclusive and attract on more diverse talent. And so like all of those things lead into each other. And so people leave, or B Corps or purpose-driven businesses gain these really, amazing talent, and that generally just want to be part of something more.
Yeah, I think we've thought about this a lot, like trying to build a business as well. And I think like what people can do is like really incredible, but what people usually do, like the average employee in a company, is normally quite below average. But I think the gap in the middle is probably just like having some purpose to their job. And their
job role as
agree.
well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like that generally affects the work that you do. So, for example, in the creative sector, or even in the advertising sector, a lot of my clients, once you start to think about purpose and other things than profit, you start to actually win projects and campaigns which also have social or environmental impacts, which means the creatives in the business are getting to create these campaigns which have purpose, which makes them feel excited. It makes them feel happy, it makes them feel fulfilled, versus working on an advertising campaign, for example, which is clearly greenwashing and leading people into false pretense. So the actual benefit to people to work on these projects, which do end up coming, it does take time, it's really massive. It's life-changing. They go home and they're proud of what they've done in the day versus, oh, wow, I don't even want to think about that tomorrow. I'm going to the weekend. I just want to shut it out. So that there is major, major differences to team morale, to like company culture. And I just think generally that's led by ethics, right? Just having an ethical mindset as a business.
Yeah, I think there's nothing better than going home and feeling proud about what you've done for the day. Yeah. It's the nicest thing, right?
Definitely. I wanted to ask you about your pledge to become carbon neutral by 2030. Can you explain why you decided to do this and why you think it's important for businesses to do?
Yeah, it's actually net zero, not carbon neutral. We are
sorry.
No, that's fine.
Typo there in my notes.
So we're currently carbon neutral, which basically means once you start reducing, you offset your emissions annually and you match them. So we've used an incredible company called Earthly. We match our emissions with nature-based solutions with really verified projects. They've got some amazing technology and a really amazing team. I've been using them for a really long time. So we've been doing that for a while. And that's something we talk about. We don't really talk about it so much anymore, just because there's been so much controversy around carbon neutral, largely, as you probably know, led by like airline companies having these crazy claims that, you can put £1 on your flight or something to offset.
Do you think it's still a valuable thing to do, being carbon neutral, despite all that, fight that's been going on over it?
Yeah, I do, because at the end of the day, it's the difference of investing in nature or not investing in nature. And so I think as long as you're doing it with the right companies, and I always say to people, Earthly are great, Ecology are great, and then there's obviously like Gold Standard and things, but I find these other ones are a little bit more like 21st century, dare I say it. And they're really great platforms, and that you can communicate with the team and ask questions and all those things that really matter. So I see it as a massive value. I've just kind of reframed it for some of my clients, and we just talk about investing in nature rather than carbon neutral. But it's a really important kind of interim goal. So we have a very ambitious net zero target. Partly obviously why we do, quite extreme, but really like big changes, like reducing our travel radius, and eliminating fossil fuels, and all these things is helping us get closer to reducing our emissions by at least 90%. It's going to be very tough, and that's because we actually have a really comprehensive carbon footprint report that we do across our scope 3. So that touches on everything from business suppliers to any small events we run, to refrigerants, like all of these things, to home working, to commuting. So it is going to be challenging, but naturally, industries are decarbonising as well, which makes it easier. And yeah, it's something that we are really striving towards. And
And
we update
do you
it
think
each
it's
year.
achievable? Because obviously it's pretty huge, isn't it? I mean, do you want to just explain net zero for anyone that's not completely sure what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So Science-Based Targets Initiative states that net zero is a 90 to 95% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And that is nothing to do with offsetting. So this is just reducing your emissions. Now, for us, the travel is a big part of our scope 2 emissions. But as I said, we've also got scope 3, which we pretty comprehensively report on. And so it really is to do with other companies also decarbonising. And it's to do with, if we're not working with those companies who are decarbonising, then we need to change to those that are. So a lot of it, again, comes down to supply chain management. Is it achievable? I would love to think so. But, if it's not, then we just keep trying and we just keep reducing and we just, keep trying to find solutions. The reason why it's very ambitious compared to, well, obviously the latest is 2050, but I wouldn't suggest anyone to have that target, especially an SME. So even if it was 2040, is by then you're also going to have more technology which is available to do that. So obviously we are banking on being able to move our vehicles, a lot of our vehicles away to EVs. We also are banking on being able to create and build our own warehouse, which is a massive, massive part of it. So at the moment, we're in, a little warehouse kind of block, and we don't have much control. We try to liaise with landlords, etc. So actually, by building our own warehouse, by making sure it is functioning exactly how we want it, we can get all the data that we want. That is also, those two big elements are really going to help us. So it's also being in a financial position to do those, which when you try and take some gambles as a business, setting up venues, creating your own events rather than just sticking to a kind of supplier model that we've had in the past. It's also to do with that. And again, it's feeding into balancing people, planet and profit all the time.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting there about what you said about, it is ambitious, it's got to be ambitious. And if we don't hit it, it shouldn't be something that, it shouldn't be seen as like a greenwashing, because it's not, is it? It's still, what you're doing is still amazing anyway. And you're still making huge steps to become a much more sustainable business.
And it's still achievable, and we also have a plan of how to get there. So it's not just important. Like we're going, fingers crossed.
That would be greenwashing.
That would be really greenwashing. But
and if there's anyone listening that is thinking we would like to do this as a company, obviously you mentioned earlier, like probably the starting point is just start measuring like your carbon footprint and your impact. But once they've done that, how do they come up with that plan? What advice have you got from someone that's got the plan?
So essentially, I actually write about this on my other website, which is Planet A, which is my consultancy as well. It's quite interesting because there's lots of tools out there to measure your footprint. You've probably seen them. There's so many. The problem with them are a lot of people and businesses kind of sucked into spending so much money on a carbon calculation tool, which says, oh, set net zero targets, action plan, that kind of thing. But actually, they're not specific to where the emissions are coming from, for example. And they're not actually very actionable. Like I've seen a lot of them, they're very simple, not straightforward. So if it was me, I would probably, if you don't have the skills yourself, I would hire the skills of a consultant, a sustainability consultant, a carbon analyst, because it's very much about analysing where your emissions are coming from, understanding the most significant impacts, and then setting actionable targets. and having the knowledge to know where that comes from. Now, there's lots of amazing advice on the SME Climate Hub, but it's a completely new skill and area. And so I would suggest make sure people don't spend too much on carbon calculation, so that you can use that money and that budget in sustainability to actually get the help to take action. And that's probably the biggest pitfall that I see. The SME Climate Hub has a free tool. It's not the most comprehensive, but there is a new one launching this month. I actually use the tool Climate Essentials, which is like a government-backed tool. It's really affordable. So for a business of, I think, up to 5, it's about £150 a year. That kind of affordable, which is great for us. You add different sites. You can have venues on there. You can have events. It's got really great reporting. But then I would say you need that support. So yeah, shout out if anyone needs any support. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to know where to go next. And there is no harm in asking for a bit of help, as long as you've kind of got that budget secured with your leadership team and you're not spending too much actually just getting the data.
I think the thing you said earlier as well that I quite liked about you guys is it sounds like you really engage and build a bit of a community around like your suppliers, especially like working with local suppliers and obviously customers. And maybe your business model suits that a bit more than a lot of companies out there because of what you do. But yeah, I think any businesses listening, I think just if you're at a starting point, just trying to engage with like-minded businesses that are on like the same kind of journey, I think is really, really important. That's what we found helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it really helps. It really helps. And it's the same with everything, right? Like-minded people are within your team because you attract the right people, and then within your supply chain. And then hopefully you also then attract like-minded clients and customers. So it's a bit of a kind of wheel of interest. Yeah.
Nice.
So we always like to end the podcast on the same question, which is interesting. So we like to ask where you see the world in 10 years.
Okay.
Or maybe where you hope to see the world, depending on your answer.
I'm going to have my optimistic hat on because we need this. Nice. We need optimism. I mean, for me, I think we are really facing so many political challenges. And I think the word that just screams to me, this question, is just peace. I think we need peace. We need people to connect. And I think there's so many people in the world who care about different things. Naturally, we're humans, we're caring, we have hearts, all of these things. Yet for some reason, our kind of capitalist system is telling us that nobody else cares, that nobody else feels like you, that you're an individual, that you're not connected to anyone, and you need to just do your thing and do it well, and you'll be okay. And this whole work hard, play, it's toxic. It's really toxic. And so I would love to see. I get extremely jealous, actually, even of religious communities and people that come together, and different cultural communities that come together. And for me, community is what is going to bring people together and drive collective action and make people feel like they're part of something more. And whether that's, locally, industry, whatever it is, I'd love to see everyone way more collected and understanding, to help us achieve a more peaceful world together.
Nice. Goosebumps.
Yeah. I hope that happens.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, companies, like yours, Holly, and the B Corp movement, like they really are. They really are. It's catching like wildfire, and it's obviously because it's just creates nicer companies to work in.
I mean, the good type of what? That's a
strange. Sorry, not forest fire, not climate created forest fire. Yeah. That was a metaphor. Yeah. Oh, that was fun. That was really great. I really enjoyed that, and it's really nice to hear about like what you guys are doing as well, and also like we secretly use this as an opportunity to get like tips and steal ideas from people. So I've been like noting
Love
stuff
it.
down as we've been talking. So
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. We hope it was truly
Earth your while.
For more information, visit reuserbox.co.uk/earthyourwhile.
And if you'd like to appear on the next series of Earth Your While, please email media@reuserbox.co.uk.